5 years with the Colts and 5 different QBs. Thank you, Carson, for everything this year, my guy. We wish you nothing but the best. So taking a look, yes, he was right. There are those 5 quarterbacks there the Colts have had dating back to 2017, the most recent being Carson Wentz, before that Phillip Rivers and Jacoby Brissett, and the carousel will continue to spin. Let's welcome in our quarterback, Brady Quinn, to talk about everything going on in the NFL. It's been a busy 24 hours or so. So let's start with Carson Wentz to the Commanders. But let's start with what this means for the Colts. No first-round pick. We mentioned that. Not even sure they would actually look to the draft for a quarterback. Where do they turn now?
That's a great question, and maybe they don't turn anywhere. You know, we saw them implement a strategy before. We heard the phrase "suck for luck." Well, that happened to work out, and they ended up getting Andrew Luck with the first overall pick during the year in which Peyton Manning's had the neck injury, needed multiple surgeries to be able to fix it. And whether or not they ultimately were trying to tank the season to get Andrew Luck, that's how it was perceived on the outside. 2 years from now, you have the option of Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud, both of which I think are better than any quarterback that's in this year's draft class. So if you're the Colts, you might be looking a little bit further down the road to position yourselves for that moment where you can draft a guy like them. However, that being said, there's still some potential free agents that are out there. Jameis Winston has yet to be signed, even though he's coming off a torn ACL. There's the assumption that Mitchell Trubisky will go to New York with the New York Giants because Brian Daboll, who was the offensive coordinator in Buffalo, was with him last year. But we don't necessarily know if that's the case. You know, I would say that the bidding war goes up now for a guy like Mitchell Trubisky, Jameis Winston, who are both free agents, or even Jimmy Garoppolo. He's still under contract for another year. Yes, he had surgery on his throwing shoulder, but he should be ready come 2022, start of the season. So maybe that price tag goes up for whatever it's going to cost for the Colts to trade for a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo to come in and save the day. Either way, though, as you said earlier, Amanda, it's been a carousel at the quarterback position there for Indianapolis. And it's tough when they expect so much out of that position to, in 1 year's time, be able to do enough to get this team to the playoffs and to make a run. And I think, Carson Wentz, a second year in the system, probably would have been better off for the Colts than the alternative right now.
What about Washington here? Word they wanted a bunch of different guys. They were trying to get a lot of different quarterbacks there. Nobody panned out. Now they have Carson Wentz. Pete gave this trade like a B for them. But what are the Commanders' outlook now with Wentz at the helm?
Well, there's a couple ways of looking at it. We can look at it right now in the short term. And if the guy who was bullish enough to trade for Carson Wentz, a first-round pick, and Frank Reich, has essentially given up on him, I mean, that's how it looks, at least on the outside, and, you're going to go ahead and trade him away and get 2 third-round picks in exchange, that is a win. I mean, once you move past the initial team that drafts you, and you don't have an advocate in your corner, it's hard to then find footing. Wentz found that in Indianapolis with Frank Reich, but he's moved on after 1 year's time. So again, the compensation they got in return, 2 third-round picks, to me, is a win for the Colts. Now, I think over the long run, we're going to see the Washington Commanders be a lot more competitive than maybe some people believe with Wentz. I'm not giving up on him. I think he had a much better year, all things considered, going to a new team, starting the season with an injured foot, which we all tend to forget. And really, at the end of the day, probably being one of the better quarterbacks in that division, or maybe in the AFC conference if we're going to break it up that way. I think he immediately goes in and is the second best quarterback to Dak Prescott in the NFC East, and they've got some weapons in Washington. So right now it looks like the Colts won this trade. I think by the end of next year, we might be turning around saying, all right, maybe Carson Wentz kind of found a home here in Washington with what he's able to do on the field.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.